San, 17 a.m. Ouagadougou. The red phone rings. Not tanks, not soldiers, just a threat. 48 hours. Restore our contracts, or be removed. But instead of fear, Ibrahim Traoré answered with one word: no. Why does Africa's sovereignty always come with a death sentence attached? This is not just a phone call. This is the moment an empire trembled before a soldier who refused to kneel. In September 2022, international outlets from Reuters to Al Jazeera reported that Captain Ibrahim Traoré led a sudden military takeover in Burkina Faso, ousting the previous government in the name of restoring security and sovereignty. The young officer, only 34 at the time, was described as the world's youngest head of state. His rise was not through elections, but through a declaration. Burkina Faso would no longer be dictated by outsiders, while its people bled under terrorism and poverty. By early 2023, Africa news channels chronicled how Traoré openly defied foreign powers. He demanded the withdrawal of French troops, questioned exploitative mining contracts, and declared, "We have chosen to fight for our independence. We will not subcontract our dignity." But that was just the tip of the iceberg. What followed in the shadows was far more dangerous. An ultimatum delivered not with ballots or bullets, but with a single phone call. The palace was silent when the ultimatum arrived. Dark corridors, guards half asleep. The city outside, wrapped in dust and stillness, and then an echo. The shrill ring of the red phone, the one reserved for emergencies beyond borders. President Ibrahim Traoré lifted the receiver. On the other end, a voice colder than the Sahel night. "Captain, you have 48 hours. Reinstate our mining contracts. Reopen our surveillance base. Undo every decree that cut our influence in Burkina Faso. 48 hours, or you will not finish your term." It was not a suggestion, it was a command, dressed as diplomacy. For decades, Africa has endured these veiled threats, loans tied with strings, aid packaged with conditions, armies disguised as partners, but never before had the demand been so blunt, so naked. And here stood Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation without nuclear power, without oil wealth, without a navy or satellites. What did it have? A people weary of being commanded, a leader untested but unyielding. Traoré set the phone down, not with fear, but with clarity. He summoned his ministers in the dead of night. The defense chief, the head of intelligence, the foreign affairs advisor, faces pale under the fluorescent lights of the crisis room. The recording was played, the ultimatum echoed, a silence heavier than stone followed. The Minister of Defense was first to speak. "This is not about contracts. This is regime change. They want to remove you and send a message to every leader who resists them." The intelligence chief nodded gravely. Weeks of satellite sweeps, cyber intrusions, money shifting into strange accounts. They were preparing this moment. The advisor of foreign affairs whispered what no one wanted to admit: "You can still resign. Leave the country alive, maybe even in comfort." "No." Traoré's voice cut the air. "We do not bargain away sovereignty. If I fall with my people, not before them." The room stiffened. Every man and woman present knew this was more than politics. This was war, not of tanks and rifles, but of silence, screens, and stories. Traoré stood, facing the map of Burkina Faso, pinned on the wall. His words fell like a verdict. "Then let us show them what happens when they threaten the wrong African nation." Morning broke over Ouagadougou, but the city did not wake in peace. Rumors moved faster than the sun markets, buzzing with whispers, radios crackling with coded warnings, soldiers stationed at intersections with eyes sharp as knives. Something unseen was pressing down on the nation, and the people felt it. Inside the presidential compound, Ibrahim Traoré worked without pause. Every communique was reviewed twice. Every border guard was on high alert. In the war room, satellite images glowed across screens, unfamiliar aircraft patterns over the Sahel, unidentified drones hovering near gold mines, long leased to foreign corporations. Burkina Faso had no luxury of denial. The threat was real, yet Traoré understood something his enemies had forgotten. Power is not only measured in weapons, but in the will of the people. At midday, he walked out unannounced into the streets of Ouagadougou. No bodyguards in formation, no armored convoy, just him, in fatigues. Boots still dusty from the night before. Crowds gathered instantly. Students, merchants, mothers carrying infants on their backs. "Is it true?" A young man shouted, "Are they coming for you?" Traoré's reply was firm, stripped of ceremony. "They are not coming for me. They are coming for us. For our land, our freedom, our children's future, and I will not let them take it." The square erupted, voices rising, as if the whole of Burkina Faso was speaking through them. Some cried, some raised fists, some fell to their knees in prayer. It was not politics anymore, it was survival, and it was dignity. That afternoon, foreign ambassadors requested an urgent meeting. They came in black cars, polished shoes clicking on marble floors. Their faces, masks of concern, their language was polished, but their message clear: de-escalate, compromise, or face consequences. Traoré met them in silence for a long minute. Then he leaned forward and said words that would ripple across Africa news outlets within hours. "Burkina Faso is not a chessboard. We are not pawns. If you think 48 hours will break us, then you have already misunderstood who we are." The room froze. The ambassadors exchanged nervous glances. And for the first time, the pressure began to shift, because somewhere between fear and defiance, a truth had emerged. The youngest president in the world had just declared that he would rather face ruin than surrender his people's dignity. Hour 12. The ultimatum was already burning through the veins of the capital. Foreign media reported growing instability. Diplomats whispered of an impending coup. But on the streets of Burkina Faso, the air was different. It wasn't panic, it was preparation. Women stocked grain in burlap sacks. Men repaired broken rifles, inherited from grandfathers. Youths painted walls with slogans in red: "Sovereignty or death." Inside the presidential palace, the War Council convened again. Maps littered the table. Intelligence reports piled like sandbags. Every path forward seemed to end in confrontation. General Ouedraogo spoke first. "Mr. President, satellites confirm new movements on the border, convoys, trucks with no plates. These are mercenaries, not regular soldiers. They are waiting for a green light." The finance minister added grimly, "Banks are tightening, transactions blocked. They're already squeezing us, trying to starve the nation before they fire a single bullet." The room grew heavy, but Ibrahim Traoré did not flinch. "They want fear to be our currency, but we will answer with unity." He ordered radio stations to broadcast his words across the nation, not a speech written by advisors, but spoken directly from his heart. "My brothers and sisters of Burkina Faso, tonight they tell us we are too small to resist, too weak to choose our own path. But I tell you this, we are not measured by the size of our armies or the weight of our gold. We are measured by the courage to stand when others bow. 48 hours. Let them count the minutes. We will count the generations who will remember this stand." His voice carried through battered radios in mud villages, through flickering televisions in crowded bars, through smartphones clutched by young activists scrolling Africa news updates. Everywhere, people leaned closer. Everywhere, resolve, hardened, and yet, across the Mediterranean, powerful men in Kyiv rooms were already drafting scenarios: destabilization, media disinformation, economic sabotage. They spoke of Ibrahim Traoré not as a leader, but as an obstacle, one that must be removed before his defiance became a wildfire spreading across Africa. The clock ticked on. 36 hours remained. Hour 24. Half the countdown was gone. By now, pressure was pouring in from every direction. Africa news networks carried breaking reports of shadow operations near Burkina Faso's borders. Anonymous social media accounts funded from abroad spread rumors of divisions within the army. Some claimed Ibrahim Traoré had already fled. Others circulated forged documents suggesting he had sold the nation's gold in secret. It was psychological war, sharper than any sword. In the palace, Traoré gathered his closest allies. They will not attack only with weapons. He said, they will attack with lies, until we doubt each other, until we doubt ourselves. The Minister of Communication raised a trembling hand. Mr. President, our people are frightened. Markets are empty. Fuel is vanishing. We must give them more than speeches. We must give them proof we will endure. Traoré thought for a long moment, then gave an order few expected. Open the palace gates. Let the people in. By dusk, thousands streamed into the courtyard. Farmers from the countryside, youth draped in the red-green-gold flag of Burkina Faso, mothers singing lullabies as if to steady the air itself. Soldiers shared their rations with civilians. The line between government and governed blurred until they became one body, one heartbeat. Standing on the steps, Traoré raised his fist. They said, I should hide in fear, but here I stand in the open, with you. If they wish to strike, let them strike, not at me alone, but at the soul of Burkina Faso. Cheers erupted, echoing into the night. In that moment, every satellite pointed at Ouagadougou. Every intelligence officer, listening in foreign capitals, heard more than a crowd. They heard a nation declaring itself alive. But even as the people roared, the shadow tightened. Mercenary convoys shifted closer. A neighboring government, under pressure from its foreign allies, quietly mobilized troops along the border. Somewhere, in a brightly lit conference room, thousands of miles away, a clock ticked on a polished desk. The ultimatum was nearing its end. 24 hours remained, and the world was about to learn whether the youngest president alive would survive them. Hour 36. The city did not sleep. Drums pounded in the neighborhoods, echoing through dusty streets like war cries. Candles burned in the windows of Ouagadougou's poorest districts as families prayed for the nation's soul. Every rooftop became a watchtower, every shadow a question. When will the blow fall? In the palace, Ibrahim Traoré received a secret cable from an African ally. Its words were brief, but their weight immense. Foreign operatives confirmed inside your ranks. They aim to fracture your command before the deadline. Traoré's face did not betray fear, but those around him saw the storm in his eyes. Betrayal was more dangerous than bullets. If the army split, if trust collapsed, then Burkina Faso's resistance would crumble before the countdown ended. He ordered an emergency assembly with his officers, the chamber filled with men who had fought alongside him in dusty outposts, and others whose loyalty was less certain. Tension cracked the air. Traoré stood before them, his hand resting on the map of Burkina Faso. His voice carried the weight of generations. They say, we cannot stand against empires, that we must trade our dignity for survival. But I tell you, a soldier without dignity is already dead. If you are with me, you stand for every farmer tilling his field, every mother carrying water on her head, every child dreaming of a future where Africa bows to no one. Silence. Then one by one, fists struck the table. For Burkina Faso, the officers shouted. The chamber shook with their cry. Whatever doubts remained were drowned in unity. Yet even as loyalty flared, the walls outside trembled with the hum of foreign drones circling the skies. Africa news headlines blazed across the internet. Crisis in Burkina Faso. Will Traoré survive the ultimatum? Commentators predicted his downfall, analysts dissected his inexperience, and foreign leaders smirked behind closed doors. But in Ouagadougou, the story was no longer about survival, it was about defiance. The countdown read 12 hours. The storm was almost here. Hour 44. Only 4 hours remained. The ultimatum had become a countdown whispered in every corner of Burkina Faso. Radios repeated it like a drumbeat. Markets shut early. Families huddled together. In the villages, elders told the youth, remember this night. Your grandchildren will ask you where you were when Burkina chose to stand. In the palace, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The intelligence chief rushed in with new reports. Foreign channels are declaring you deposed. Mr. President, they are broadcasting it already. As if the coup had happened, Traoré smirked. They think words can bury us before bullets are fired. The defense minister interrupted, voice low. Mr. President, mercenaries have crossed the border. They are 20 kilometers from Ouagadougou. We have hours at best. The weight of the moment pressed hard. Everyone looked to Traoré. His next decision would either doom the nation or carve its name into history. He ordered the national radio to go live again. This time, not only to Burkina Faso but to the world. His speech was short, but it carried fire. Brothers and sisters, they say, the time is up. They say we are finished. But listen well, Burkina Faso does not live on their clocks. We live on our own time. On the soil, our ancestors bled to keep free. If they come, they will not face a man, they will face a people. The message spread like wildfire, picked up by African news networks, replayed on social media across the continent. In Dakar, in Bamako, in Lagos, crowds gathered around screens, nodding, shouting, weeping. Across Africa, one name echoed like a drum beat. Ibrahim Traoré. But in hidden command rooms abroad, the response was swift. Accelerate. A voice commanded. Satellites tracked convoys moving faster. Coded orders pulsed through encrypted channels. Hour 47. The last hour of the ultimatum. The palace was surrounded by citizens who refused to go home. Shoulder to shoulder, they formed a human shield around their president. Old men with walking sticks, young men with slingshots, mothers with infants wrapped tightly on their backs. As midnight approached, the tension was unbearable. Would the attack fall? Would the ultimatum explode into chaos? And then something unexpected happened. Hour 48. Midnight struck. The mercenary convoys, engines, rumbling at the edge of Ouagadougou, waited for the signal to advance. Foreign satellites hovered above, eyes unblinking. Analysts in distant capitals leaned forward, pens ready to write the fall of Ibrahim Traoré into tomorrow's headlines. And yet the order never came. Instead, something remarkable unfolded. Across West Africa, borders lit up with resistance. Civilians in Mali, Niger, and Guinea blocked roads, forming barricades with burning tires and sandbags. Young men draped in Pan-African flags shouted through megaphones, "If you touch Burkina, you touch us all." Even soldiers from neighboring nations refused deployment. In barracks, they laid down weapons, saying, "We will not fight our brothers." The ultimatum collapsed, not with a gunshot, but with silence. The carefully engineered strike unraveled because the people of Africa had already chosen their side. They would not allow a foreign hand to erase another leader who dared to stand free. In Ouagadougou's square, the crowd of thousands erupted into song, their voices rising against the Sahel sky. The mercenaries, sensing the tide, melted back across the border. The threat dissolved like smoke in wind. For the first time in generations, it was not a foreign decree that decided an African leader's fate. It was the people themselves. And from that night onward, Burkina Faso was no longer just a nation under siege, it was a symbol. The morning after the deadline, Africa news headlines carried a shocking absence: "No coup, no collapse, no surrender." Instead, photographs showed thousands still camped outside the presidential palace, their eyes lit with the pride of survival. Foreign analysts scrambled to explain what had happened. Some spoke of miscommunication, others of strategic hesitation. But in the streets of Burkina Faso, no one was confused. They knew exactly why the assault never came. The people had turned the ultimatum inside out. Ibrahim Traoré walked among them at dawn. Not behind armored glass, but shoulder to shoulder, his fatigues still creased from sleepless nights. Women pressed their babies into his arms. Old men kissed his forehead. Youths climbed lampposts, waving flags and chanting, "Traoré, Traoré, Africa stands." In that instant, his image shifted. He was no longer merely the president of Burkina Faso, he had become the living proof of a possibility long buried, that Africa could stand upright, unbent, against the full weight of foreign power, and the irony was undeniable. An ultimatum designed to crush him had elevated him instead. What was meant to be his downfall had become his coronation as a continental symbol of defiance. Even his critics admitted a truth difficult to swallow. He had crossed a threshold few dared even approach, and from that moment, every leader on the continent, every citizen, scrolling headlines from Dakar to Nairobi, asked themselves a question, whispered like a prayer. If Burkina Faso can defy the impossible, why not us? When the dust of those 48 hours settled, the world looked at Burkina Faso differently. Once dismissed as a fragile state, it now stood as a beacon. Its people had stared down, a storm meant to erase them, and they had not flinched. Schools began teaching a new chapter of history, not one written by colonizers, but by their own hands. Markets reopened, not with the same wealth, but with a deeper currency, dignity. Farmers tilled the soil with songs of freedom. Mothers whispered to their children, "This is the land that did not bow." And Ibrahim Traoré, standing on the balcony of his modest palace, delivered words that echoed across Africa news, across oceans, across generations. "We did not ask for permission to be free, we stood up to win it." That sentence became more than a declaration. It became a covenant. Across the continent, leaders revisited contracts, questioned alliances, and citizens began to see themselves not as dependents, but as authors of their own future. The lesson was simple, yet eternal. The strength of a nation lies not in its weapons, but in its will. If you believe Ibrahim Traoré is a blessing for Africa, share this story. Subscribe to continue the journey of an Africa that will never bow its head again. God bless Africa.